I lost my husband, my 6-year-old daughter, and the ability to walk in one single night, all in the same nightmare of twisted metal on Interstate 90. 12 days later, I wheeled myself to my parents' $4.7 million glass palace, bandages still wrapped around my head, and begged for a place to stay while I healed. My mother looked at me through a thin crack in the door and said, "Figure it out yourself." Then she shut the door in my face. I sat alone on their porch for 20 minutes under the cold dark, wondering if I had any reason left to keep breathing. But they didn't know about the metal card hidden in my grandfather's old oak box. And they didn't know that card would rewrite everything, including who really owned their precious fortune. My name is Vivian Hartwell Forrester, and this is my reckoning. I'm 34 years old. This is the story of how I lost everything and found something they never wanted me to have. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. My father, Edward Cole, built Cole Properties into a so-called $120 million commercial real estate empire, or so the story goes. My mother, Margaret, reinvented herself as Seattle's philanthropy queen, chairing 3 charity boards and hosting galas where the guest list read like a who's who of Puget Sound wealth. And then there was Richard, my older brother, the golden child. From the time Richard turned 16, our father groomed him for succession. Board meetings at 17, a corner office at 22. By 25, he was COO. His name embossed on business cards I was never offered. Me, I was told girls didn't need to learn the family business. I remember my 18th birthday with perfect clarity. Richard received a BMW 3 Series wrapped in a red bow, parked in the circular driveway. I received a suitcase and a card that read, "Time to learn independence, sweetheart." I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Washington, top 10% of my class. When I told my mother, she glanced up from her phone and said, "That's nice, dear." Richard just closed a $4 million deal. My father never once asked what I studied, so I stopped waiting for their approval. I funded my own way through an MBA. I built my own career, my own life, my own definition of success, far from the Cole family spotlight. But there was one person in that family who saw me, really saw me. My grandfather, Harold Whitmore. He used to tell me, "Whitney, kindness matters more than money. Remember that when everyone else forgets." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. I would eventually. I built my career one project at a time, one late night at a time, one impossible deadline at a time. By 33, I was senior project director at Meridian Technologies, leading a team of 23 engineers and analysts. My specialty was digital transformation, taking broken systems and making them work. My biggest project saved a regional hospital chain $42 million annually. The CEO sent a personal thank you letter. My team received bonuses. I received a promotion and a salary bump to $187,000 plus performance bonuses that pushed me well past $200,000 in good years. Not bad for the girl who was told she didn't need to understand business. But every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every rare family gathering I attended, the pattern repeated itself. Richard would announce his latest acquisition, his latest deal, his latest win. My parents would beam, champagne would flow. No one ever asked about my work. Once I tried. I mentioned the hospital project, the lives potentially saved through better resource allocation. Richard laughed and said, "So, you're a glorified IT consultant?" My mother smiled politely and changed the subject. I learned to become invisible at those tables. It was easier than the alternative. Daniel rebalanced my entire world. My husband saw me the way my family never did. "Whitney," he told me once, "you don't need them to validate you. I see you, I've always seen you. He was a software engineer at a small startup, brilliant and kind and completely unimpressed by the Cole family fortune. We bought a modest house in Corkland, drove sensible cars, and built a life that had nothing to do with my parents' world. When Lily was born, I thought maybe, just maybe, my mother would soften. She didn't attend the baby shower. March 14th, 2024, started like any other Friday. I kissed Daniel goodbye at 7:15 a.m. Lily was still in her pajamas, eating cereal at the kitchen table, her stuffed bunny propped beside her bowl. "Mommy, can we get ice cream after dinner?" she asked. "If you eat all your vegetables," I said. "Deal." I drove to the office, sat through 3 meetings, reviewed a project timeline, sent 14 emails. Normal, routine, forgettable. At 5:47 p.m., my phone lit up. The number was unfamiliar. I almost did not answer. "Mrs. Forrester, this is Officer Martinez with the Washington State Patrol. There's been an accident on Interstate 90. The next 3 hours exist in my memory as fragments. Shattered glass, flashing lights, a sheet pulled over small forms, voices telling me things I couldn't process. A semi-truck driver dozed off at the wheel. He crossed the median at 65-year kneeling approach. Daniel's sedan didn't stand a chance. My husband was gone on impact. My daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, who still believed in tooth fairies and asked for ice cream, was pronounced dead at the scene. I survived because I was in the back seat reaching for Lily's drop toy. The angle of impact crushed the front of the car and left me with a shattered L1, L2 vertebrae. When I woke up in Harborview Medical Center 3 days later, a doctor I'd never met told me that my husband and daughter were gone and that I would probably never walk again. Paralyzed from the waist down. 12% chance of meaningful recovery with aggressive rehabilitation. I remember staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them over and over because counting was easier than feeling. $47,000 in medical bills accumulated in 8 days. Insurance covered 60%. The hospital sent a social worker to discuss next steps. She asked if I had family support. I thought of my parents' mansion in Bellevue, 20 minutes away. I thought of my mother's voice. Family image. "I don't know," I told her. The email arrived on day 10. I was still in the hospital, still learning how to transfer myself from bed to wheelchair, still waking up in the middle of the night, reaching for a husband who wasn't there. From HR Department, Meridian Technologies. Subject: Employment Status Update. Dear Ms. Forrester, due to recent organizational restructuring, your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. Please find attached your severance package details and COBRA insurance information. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. 2-month severance, health insurance for 30 days, 7 years of 80-hour weeks, 2 promotions, and 3 outstanding performance awards. Reduced to a 200-word email. I knew what restructuring meant. They didn't want an employee in a wheelchair. The liability, the accommodations, the optics. I called my supervisor, he didn't answer. I called HR. They transferred me to voicemail. The math was simple, brutal. Savings, $38,000. Current medical bills, $47,000. Estimated monthly rehabilitation cost $15,000. Monthly expenses, rent, utilities, food, $3,200. At that burn rate, I had 8 weeks before I was completely broke. 8 weeks paralyzed, grieving, and alone. I lay in that hospital bed and stared at my phone, scrolling through contacts, trying to find anyone who could help. Friends from work had already stopped texting. Acquaintances offered thoughts and prayers, but nothing practical. Daniel's family was small, scattered, still reeling from their own grief, which left one option, the option I swore I would never take. My parents. Maybe. I thought tragedy would change them. Maybe blood would matter more than image. I was wrong. I called my mother on day 11. The phone rang 4 times. I counted each one, my heart hammering against my ribs. When she answered, her voice was the same as always, polished, measured, revealing nothing. Whitney, we heard about the accident. Not, how are you? Not, we're so sorry. Just acknowledgement that she possessed information. Mom, my voice cracked. I hadn't spoken aloud in 2 days except to nurses. I don't have anywhere to go. The hospital is discharging me tomorrow. I need a place to stay while I recover. Silence. 3 seconds. 4. Whitney. This is very sudden. My husband and daughter died, Mom. 12 days ago. Yes, we know. We received the funeral notice. I waited for her to say they'd been unable to attend, that there had been a conflict, that they'd been devastated to miss it. She said nothing. Can I come home? I asked. Just for a few months. Just until I can figure out what to do next. More silence. I heard the faint sound of the ice clinking in a glass. Come by tomorrow evening, she finally said. Your father and I will discuss it. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my wheelchair in the hospital hallway and let the phone drop to my lap. A passing nurse asked if I was okay. I nodded. I wasn't okay, but I'd convinced myself that seeing me in person in a wheelchair, clearly broken, would remind them that I was their daughter, their flesh and blood. I'd convinced myself that even Edward and Margaret Cole couldn't look at their own child suffering and turn away. I had never been more wrong about anything in my life. Tiffany Morrison drove me to Bellevue. She was Daniel's younger sister, 29, an ER nurse at Seattle General, and the only person who'd shown up at my hospital room every single day since the accident. She'd brought me clothes, toiletries, and meals that weren't beige hospital food. You don't have to do this, she said, as we pulled onto I-405, heading toward my parents' neighborhood. My apartment is small, but we could make it work. Your studio barely fits you, I said, and the bathroom is in wheelchair accessible. I could renovate. With what money, Tiff? She didn't answer. We both knew her $62,000 nursing salary didn't leave room for contractor bills. The drive took 25 minutes, but it felt like hours. I watched the scenery change through the window from modest apartment complexes to manicured corporate campuses to sprawling estates hidden behind iron gates and hedges. My parents' house appeared around a bend, 8,000 square ft of Pacific Northwest modern architecture, all glass and stone and perfectly landscaped gardens. A $47 million monument to success. I grew up in that house. I took my first steps in that house. I had my heart broken in that house more times than I could count. Now I was returning in a wheelchair, begging for shelter. I'll wait here, Tiffany said as we stopped at the gate, if you need me. Thank you, I squeezed her hand. But this is family business. You shouldn't have to witness it. She pressed the call button. The gate swung open. I wheeled myself up the stone path alone. I rang the doorbell at 6:47 p.m. on March 26, 2024. The door opened after 3 long minutes. My mother stood in the entryway, wearing a cream silk blouse and pearl earrings, her silver hair perfectly styled. Behind her, I could see the glow of the living room, the flicker of the gas fireplace, the shapes of people moving. She had guests. Whitney? Her eyes dropped to my wheelchair, then snapped back to my face. You came. You told me to. Yes. Well, she glanced over her shoulder, then stepped halfway outside, pulling the door partially closed behind her. This isn't a good time. We're entertaining the Hendersons. You remember them? They're on the board of the foundation. Mom, I just need to talk to Dad for 5 minutes. Yanda, your father is occupied. Her voice hardened. Whitney, look at yourself. The bandages, the chair. We simply cannot present this to our guests. I felt something crack inside my chest. I lost my family, I said. 12 days ago, I lost my husband and my daughter and my ability to walk. And I'm asking you, begging you for help. The door opened wider. My father appeared beside my mother, wearing a charcoal suit and an expression I knew too well. Cold, calculating, already decided. "Whitney," he said, "you made your choice 12 years ago when you left this family to pursue your own path. You didn't want our help then. You don't get to demand it now. I'm not demanding, I'm asking. And we're declining." He put his hand on the door. "This household has responsibilities, obligations, an image to maintain. Your presence here in your current condition would be a distraction. A distraction. I am your daughter. You were our daughter," my mother said. "Then you married that engineer and made it very clear where your loyalties lay." The door closed. I sat there for 20 minutes alone on the stone porch in the dark until Tiffany found me. She didn't say anything. She just wrapped her arms around me and let me sob. Tiffany's studio apartment was 480 square ft. She sold her sofa the next morning, listed it on Facebook Marketplace at 7 a.m., had a buyer by noon, and spent the afternoon rearranging what little furniture remained to make room for my wheelchair. "You didn't have to do that," I said, watching her push her bed against the wall. "It was an ugly sofa anyway." She wiped sweat from her forehead. "Daniel always said it looked like a sad brown cloud." The mention of his name hung in the air between us. I hadn't spoken about Daniel, really spoken about him since the accident. "He loved you," Tiffany said quietly. "You know that, right? He used to tell me that you were the best person he'd ever met, and that someday you'd realize it too." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. "I don't deserve this. You taking me in? All of this? Stop." Tiffany crouched beside my wheelchair, looking up at me with Daniel's same brown eyes. "You deserve more than you got. Way more than a sister-in-law who can only offer a fold-out bed and a bathroom that's barely accessible. It's everything. It's not enough, but it's what I have." That night, as I lay on the fold-out bed, listening to Tiffany's quiet breathing across the room, I let myself cry for real for the first time since the hospital. Before she fell asleep, Tiffany mentioned something she'd almost forgotten. "Oh, Daniel had some boxes in our family's storage unit. Old stuff. I think there might be things of yours in there too. Maybe some of your grandfather's belongings. Daniel said your grandpa left you something, but he never got around to bringing it over." I stared at the ceiling in the darkness, thinking about my grandfather, Harold. Whatever he left me, it could wait. Or so I thought. The first 3 weeks in Tiffany's apartment were an exercise in survival. I started physical therapy at Seattle Rehabilitation Center, $4,200 per month, paid directly from my shrinking savings. Every session left me exhausted and humiliated, struggling with exercises that would have been effortless before the RIC accident. My therapist, Dr. Marcus Chen, a compact man with infinite patience, delivered the first piece of genuine hope I'd had in weeks. "Your spinal cord isn't completely severed," he explained. During our second session, pointing to my MRI, "There's significant damage, but not total. With consistent work, I'd estimate a 30% chance of partial recovery. 30%. It's better than what you were told initially. Your doctors were being conservative." He handed me a resistance band. "But 30% requires 6 months of daily therapy minimum. Can you commit to that?" "I don't have a choice. Everyone has choices, Miss Forrester." Most people in your situation choose to stop fighting. I didn't stop. Meanwhile, the job search yielded nothing. I sent 47 applications in 3 weeks. 2 companies responded with interviews. Both interviews ended the moment I wheeled into the room. "We're looking for someone with more mobility," one hiring manager said, not quite meeting my eyes. The numbers on my bank statement dropped like stones. $38,000 became $31,000. $31,000 became $24,000. $24,000 became $19,500. At that rate, I'd be broke by June. Tiffany started picking up extra shifts, doubles, overnights, anything to help cover groceries. I watched her run herself ragged and felt guilt pile onto grief. I needed a miracle. What I got was a phone call. My brother's name lit up my screen on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after our parents closed their door in my face. I answered without thinking. I shouldn't have. Whitney, glad I caught you. Richard's voice was smooth, professional, the same tone he used in boardrooms. No warmth, no acknowledgement of what I'd been through. Richard, I gripped the phone tighter. Why are you calling? I need you to sign something. It's about Grandfather Harold's estate. For a moment, I couldn't process the words. Our grandfather had been dead for 8 years. Whatever estate matters existed had been settled long ago, or so I'd assumed. What about his estate? Administrative details, paperwork. You know how these things drag on, he paused. Just a standard relinquishment form, confirming you have no claims on any remaining assets. Remaining assets? Grandpa Harold ran a small jewelry store. What assets? Whitney, just sign the form. It'll take 5 minutes. I can email it right now. Something cold settled in my stomach. Richard never called me unless he wanted something, and he certainly never called about trivial paperwork. Why now? I asked. After 8 years, why does this suddenly matter? It doesn't matter, that's the point. Sign it and we can all move on. I need to think about it. His tone sharpened. There's nothing to think about. You have nothing, Whitney. No house, no job, no husband. You're living off your dead husband's sister's charity. Do you really want to make this difficult? I felt my jaw tighten. If it's nothing, why are you so eager for my signature? Because he caught himself when he spoke again. His voice was controlled, dangerous. Because if you refuse, I'll have to tell people you're trying to extort the family during a difficult time. I'm not extorting anyone. Sign the form, Whitney. No. The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, wondering what secret my family was so desperate to keep buried. Tiffany arrived home that evening with a cardboard box under her arm, dusty and water-stained. Found it, she said, setting it on the kitchen counter. It was buried behind a bunch of Daniel's college stuff. I almost missed it. The box was unmarked except for 2 initials carved into the lid. H.W. Harold Whitmore, my grandfather. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, I found a collection of memories I'd forgotten existed. Old photographs of my grandfather and grandmother at their wedding. Letters written in his careful cursive. A faded newspaper clipping about his jewelry store opening in Portland in 1962. And beneath all of it, wrapped in velvet cloth, was a metal card. It wasn't a credit card. Too heavy, wrong shape. Brushed silver about the size of a business card, with a series of numbers embossed on one side, and a small symbol I didn't recognize on the other. Tucked beside it was a letter handwritten, dated June 15th, 2015, 1 year before my grandfather's death. My dearest Whitney, if you're reading this, it means you faced hardship and still held on to your heart. I always knew you would. You were different from the others. Kinder, gentler, more like your grandmother than anyone in this family. I'm leaving you something I couldn't give to your mother. She made her choice when she married your father and turned her back on who we raised her to be. Take this card to Pacific Heritage Bank in downtown Seattle. Ask for Marcus Wellington. He'll explain everything. Live honestly. Live kindly. That's all I ever wanted for you. With all my love, Grandfather Harold. I read the letter 3 times, trying to understand. My grandfather was a jeweler, a simple man. What could he possibly have left at a bank that required a special card and a personal banker? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the darkness, turning my grandfather's words over in my mind, trying to reconcile the man I remembered with the mystery he'd left behind. Grandpa Harold had always been different from the rest of the family. He lived in a modest 2-bedroom house in Portland, drove a 10-year-old pickup truck, and wore the same brown cardigan every winter. My mother used to complain about visiting him, said he had no ambition and had wasted his potential. But I remembered other things too: the Children's Hospital in Portland with the Whitmore Wing, the scholarship fund at the University of Oregon that bore his name, the quiet checks he wrote to charities without fanfare or tax deductions. How did a small town jeweler afford any of that? And then another memory surfaced, one I hadn't thought about in years. I was 16, home from boarding school for winter break. Late at night, I'd gone to the kitchen for water and overheard my parents arguing in the study. If it weren't for the money from your father, my father had said, we wouldn't have anything. Don't. My mother's voice was sharp, warning. Don't ever bring that up again. $3.2 million, Margaret. That's what built Cole Properties. And you want to pretend? I said don't. I'd forgotten about that conversation, buried it along with all the other uncomfortable truths about my family. Now it came rushing back. $3.2 million in 1992 from a man who supposedly ran a small jewelry store. I looked at the metal card on my nightstand. Tomorrow I would find out the truth. Pacific Heritage Bank occupied a limestone building on 4th Avenue, the kind of architecture that whispered old money to anyone paying attention. I arrived at 10:15 a.m. on April 15th, 2024, 32 days after the accident that destroyed my life. Tiffany had offered to come with me, but I declined. This felt like something I needed to do alone. The lobby was all marble floors and mahogany paneling with discreet security cameras, and a hush that made the outside traffic seem miles away. A young woman at the reception desk looked up as I wheeled through the entrance, her smile faltering slightly as she registered the wheelchair. Can I help you? I placed the metal card on her desk. I need to see Marcus Wellington. Mr. Wellington is our branch director. He only meets with clients by appointment. Her smile returned, professionally apologetic. I can schedule something for next week. Please show him this card. She hesitated, then picked it up, examining it with polite confusion. Mom, I'm not sure what this. Just show it to him, please. Something in my voice must have convinced her. She excused herself, disappearing through a door marked private. I waited in the lobby, watching the second hand crawl around the face of an antique grandfather clock. 8 minutes later, the door opened. A man in his 50s emerged, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of bearing that suggested decades of discretion. His eyes went first to the card in the receptionist's hand, then to me. His expression shifted from professional neutrality to something I couldn't quite identify. Surprise? Recognition? Miss Cole? His voice was barely above a whisper. Forrester now. Vivian Hartwell, Forrester. He crossed the lobby in 4 quick strides and extended his hand. I've been waiting for you for 8 years. Marcus Wellington's private office occupied a corner of the bank's 3rd floor, with views of Puget Sound and furniture that looked older than my parents' marriage. He closed the door behind us and gestured to a leather chair positioned to accommodate a wheelchair. Then he sat across from me, folded his hands, and studied my face with an intensity that made me want to look away. You have his eyes, he said, finally. Harold's eyes. You knew my grandfather for 37 years. I managed his accounts personally from the day he established the trust. He paused. I'm sorry it took tragedy to bring you here. Harold always hoped it wouldn't. What trust? My grandfather was a jeweler. For the first time, Marcus Wellington smiled, a small knowing expression. That's what he wanted people to believe, especially your mother. He turned to his computer, typed briefly, then swiveled the monitor to face me. This is the Whitmore Trust, established June 3rd, 1987. Sole beneficiary as of Harold's death in 2016. I looked at the screen. I blinked. I looked again. The number didn't change. Current value went on to around 247,683 for that 1.2 billion. My voice came out as a whisper. That can't be right. It's right. He handed me a leather portfolio, audited annually by DOT, real estate holdings across the West Coast acquired systematically over 60 years. Your grandfather was one of the most successful and most private investors of his generation. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the portfolio. Why me? I asked. Why not my mother? Marcus Wellington's expression darkened. Because of what she became when she married your father. If you've made it this far, I have a question for you. If you were in my position, sitting in a bank office, learning you just inherited $1 billion while your parents live 20 minutes away in a mansion built on lies, what would you do? Would you confront them, disappear, burn it all down? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time because what happened next is the part of the story I've been waiting to tell. I spent the next 2 weeks in Marcus Wellington's office learning the truth about my family. The Whitmore Trust wasn't just money. It was documentation. Decades of records, contracts, correspondence. My grandfather had been meticulous, almost obsessive, about keeping evidence of everything. And what the evidence showed changed everything I thought I knew about coal properties. In 1992, my father Edward approached Harold with a proposition. Edward had found a commercial property in Bellevue, a failing strip mall that could be redeveloped into office space. He needed $3.2 million to make the purchase. He promised a return of the principal plus 15% of all future profits. Harold agreed. He dropped a contract. Both men signed. Edward never paid back a single dollar. The strip mall became the foundation of coal properties. Every subsequent acquisition, every development, every dollar my father earned traced its lineage back to that initial loan, a loan he pretended didn't exist. When Harold asked about repayment, Edward stopped taking his calls. When Harold sent letters, they went unanswered. Eventually, my grandfather stopped trying. Why didn't he sue? I asked Marcus. For Margaret's sake, he hoped she'd come back to him eventually, realize what she'd married. Marcus shook his head. She never did. So, he just let them steal from him. He let them think they'd stolen from him. There's a difference. Marcus handed me another document. This is the trust's secondary clause. If your mother or any of her descendants access the main trust under false pretenses, all funds would transfer to a charitable foundation. But if a legitimate heir proved themselves worthy through genuine hardship, they'd inherit everything. Your grandfather hired a private investigator to monitor your life for the last 10 years. Not intrusively, just enough to confirm you hadn't become like the rest of them. I thought about all the years I'd struggled, all the times I'd been overlooked and dismissed, all the moments I'd wondered if I was worth anything at all. My grandfather had been watching, believing, waiting. I don't want revenge, I said finally. What do you want? I thought about my mother's voice through that cracked door, about my father's cold eyes, the truth and boundaries. On September 15th, 2024, an envelope arrived at Tiffany's apartment. Cream-colored paper, gold embossing, the Coal Foundation crest in the corner. I stared at my name written in elegant calligraphy, Vivian Hartwell Forrester, and felt something tighten in my chest. That's weird, Tiffany said, peering over my shoulder. They haven't invited you to anything in 5 years. She was right. Since my wedding to Daniel, which my parents attended under protest and left early, I'd been systematically erased from the Cole family's social calendar. The invitation was for the Cole Foundation annual gala, scheduled for September 28th at the Bellevue Grand Ballroom. Black tie, 340 guests. The most important social event on my parents' calendar. Why now? Tiffany asked. I turned the invitation over. a handwritten note on the back in my mother's handwriting. "Whitney, we should talk. Please come." "It's a trap," Tiffany said flatly. "Probably. Richard called you about signing away your inheritance rights. Now suddenly they want you at their biggest event of the year." She shook her head. "They're planning something." I knew she was right. My family didn't extend olive branches. They crafted traps. But something had changed in the past 5 months. I had changed. I could stand now with forearm crutches, but standing nonetheless. My recovery had exceeded every prediction. 30% chance, Dr. Chan had said. I'd fought my way to 65% function through sheer stubbornness. And I had resources now. Lawyers, documentation, a billion-dollar trust that gave me more leverage than my father had ever imagined. I called Catherine Palmer, the trust's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman of 58 who'd worked with my grandfather for 20 years. "They're going to try to humiliate you publicly," she said, after I explained the situation. "I know you want to go anyway. I want them to think they're in control right up until they're not." There was a pause on the line. "Then I'll prepare a document package just in case. Just in case." September 28th was 13 days away. I started planning. The Bellevue Grand Ballroom glittered like something out of a fairy tale. If fairy tales were sponsored by hedge funds and old money. I arrived at 6:30 p.m. on September 28th, 2024 with Tiffany at my side. She'd insisted on coming as my plus one, and I hadn't argued. Having a witness felt important. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the room. Centerpieces of imported Dutch flowers adorned every table. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner while 340 of Seattle's wealthiest citizens mingled in black tie and evening gowns, champagne flutes in hand. This was my parents' kingdom, their stage, the place where they performed the role of philanthropic royalty for an audience that didn't know better. I wore a simple black dress, modest, appropriate, unremarkable. I carried forearm crutches instead of using my wheelchair, though my legs ached from the effort. I needed to stand for this. Heads turned as I entered. I saw recognition in some faces, confusion in others. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. "Is that Whitney, the one who married the engineer? I heard she was in an accident. Lost her whole family." "Why is she here?" A server directed us to our table. I wasn't surprised to find it at the far edge of the room near the service entrance. The worst seat in the house, designed to remind me of my place in the hierarchy. But as I scanned the room, I noticed something else. Near the main stage at the table of honor, my parents held court. My mother in a silver gown that probably cost more than Tiffany's monthly salary. My father in a custom tuxedo, shaking hands and slapping backs like a politician on the campaign trail. Richard beside them, already slightly drunk, laughing too loud at something. They hadn't seen me yet, or if they had, they were pretending otherwise. A waiter passed close to my table, pausing briefly. "Miss Forrester," he murmured. "Miss Palmer sends her regards." I nodded. The document package was in place, couriered to the ballroom that morning, held by hotel security until needed. At 7 p.m., the lights dimmed. My father took the stage. I straightened in my chair. This was it. "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 14th Annual Cole Foundation Gala." My father's voice filled the ballroom, amplified by hidden speakers, smooth as polished marble. He stood at the podium with the easy confidence of a man who had never doubted his place in the world. "Tonight is about legacy," he continued, "about the values that make a family strong: integrity, excellence, commitment to community." I watched him gesture expansively, watched the crowd nod along, watched the performance I'd witnessed my entire life. Then, my mother took the microphone. "Thank you all for being here. As many of you know, this past year has been challenging for our family. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. When it landed on me, she didn't look away. Our youngest daughter, Whitney, faced a terrible tragedy earlier this year. She lost her husband and child in an accident. We've done everything we could to support her during this difficult time. The lie hung in the air like smoke. Unfortunately, my mother continued, her voice taking on a practiced tone of sorrowful disappointment. Grief can sometimes bring out the worst in people. Whitney has struggled. She's made accusations, demanded things that aren't hers to demand. I felt Tiffany stiffen beside me. Around the room, heads turned in my direction. "We love Whitney," my mother said. "We always will. But we can't condone behavior that threatens to tarnish everything this family has built." Richard took the microphone next, his face flushed with wine and self-importance. "My sister has always been different. She rejected this family years ago. Now that she's facing hard times, she's trying to claim she's owed something." He laughed softly. "She's even bringing up our grandfather, a man she barely visited in his final years, claiming he left her some kind of a secret inheritance." Murmurs swept through the crowd, sympathetic glances toward my parents, pitying, suspicious glances toward me. This was it, the public execution they'd planned. I stood up from my chair, reaching for my crutches. The room fell silent. I walked toward the stage. Each step took effort more than anyone watching could know. My legs burned, my grip on the crutches whitened my knuckles, but I kept my face calm, my pace steady. The crowd parted as I approached. I saw confusion on some faces, curiosity on others. My mother's expression froze into something like horror. "Whitney," she started. "Thank you, Mother." I reached the edge of the stage, but didn't climb it. I didn't need to be above anyone. I just needed to be heard. For mentioning me, I'd like to say a few words if the guests don't mind. My father stepped forward, his politician smile straining at the edges. "Whitney, this isn't the time. I think it's exactly the time." I turned to face the crowd. "My family just told you I've been making accusations and demanding things I'm not owed. Let me be specific about what actually happened." I heard my mother hiss something to Richard. He started toward me, but stopped when he noticed the room's attention fixed entirely on me. On March 26th of this year, 12 days after I lost my husband and 6-year-old daughter in a car accident, 12 days after I learned I might never walk again, I went to my parents' home. I sat in a wheelchair on their doorstep and asked if I could stay with them while I recovered. The room was absolutely silent. My mother's response was, "We can't let the family image be affected." My father closed the door in my face. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. I saw some guests exchange glances. That's not an accusation, it's a documented fact. I sat alone on their porch for 20 minutes before my sister-in-law found me and took me in. "Whitney, that's enough," my father's voice boomed. "It's not even close to enough." I pulled a document from my small clutch bag, a single sheet folded in thirds. "My family is concerned about my grandfather Harold Whitmore's estate. Let me tell you why." I unfolded the paper and held it up. This is a loan agreement. Dated March 3rd, 1992, signed by Harold Whitmore and Edward Gold. $3.2 million to be repaid with 15% of all future profits. My father never paid back a single dollar. The murmur that swept through the room was no longer sympathetic toward my parents. My father's face had gone the color of old ash. "That document," he started, "is authentic, notarized, witnessed." I kept my voice level. My grandfather kept meticulous records. He documented every attempt he made to collect on this loan, every unreturned phone call, every ignored letter. Harold was senile toward the end, my mother interjected, her voice sharp. He didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing. I turned back to the crowd. My grandfather, Harold Whitmore, wasn't just a small town jeweler. He was one of the most successful private real estate investors on the West Coast. He simply chose to live modestly. I watched comprehension dawn on faces throughout the room and suspicion. When he died in 2016, his estate was worth over $1 billion, and he left everything, all of it, to me. The gasp was audible. I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, and turned the screen toward the crowd. The Whitmore Trust, sole beneficiary, Whitney Cole Forrester. Current value 1, bill with June 4,783,000. Verified by Pacific Heritage Bank. Audited by DOT. I let the numbers sink in, watched my father's jaw work soundlessly, watched my mother grip Richard's arm like she was drowning. My grandfather left this money to me for one reason, because I was the only member of this family who didn't sell my soul for a status. I folded the loan agreement and returned it to my bag. He watched me from a distance for 10 years. He saw how I built my own career, how I chose love over money when I married Daniel, how I raised my daughter to be kind. My voice broke slightly on daughter, I let it. And he saw how this family treated me. Every dismissal, every closed door, every reminder that I wasn't good enough. I looked directly at my parents. With the authority the Whitmore Trust gives me, I could demand the $18.7 million you owe, principal, plus 32 years of interest. I could destroy Cole properties by morning. I paused. But I refuse. The $18.7 million will be donated to Seattle Children's Hospital in my grandfather's name. I let that settle before continuing. I'm not here to destroy this family. I'm here to tell the truth and to set boundaries. I turned back to my parents, my brother. 3 faces frozen in various stages of shock and fury. From this day forward, every person in this room knows the real story of Cole Properties. They know where your fortune came from. They know how you treat your own children when they're no longer useful. I picked up my crutches. If any of you want a relationship with me in the future, you can start with an honest apology. Not to me, to Grandfather Harold. Visit his grave. Tell him you're sorry for what you did. I looked at my mother one last time. I'm not the daughter you wanted, but I am the granddaughter he raised me to be. I turned and walked back to my table. Tiffany met my eyes, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "You did it." The ballroom remained frozen in stunned silence. I'd said everything I came to say. I know what some of you are thinking right now. Would you have had the courage to do what I did? Here's the truth. 6 months before that night, I couldn't have done it either. I was too broken, too desperate for approval, too convinced that my value depended on whether my family accepted me. It took losing everything to understand that I was enough without them. If you've ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or taken for granted by the people who should love you most, I see you. You're not alone, and your worth isn't determined by their blindness. Drop a comment if this story resonated with you. Like this video if you're still watching, and stay with me, because what happened after that gala is the part that surprised even me. The gala dissolved into controlled chaos within minutes of my return to my table. I didn't stay to watch. Tiffany and I slipped out through a side exit, while conversations erupted throughout the ballroom. Voices raised, phones produced, the delicate social fabric of the evening shredding in real time. In the car, my hands finally began to shake. "Are you okay?" Tiffany asked, starting the engine. "I don't know." I stared at my trembling fingers. "I've never done anything like that before." "You were incredible. I was terrified." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Those aren't mutually exclusive." By the time we reached her apartment, my phone had 17 missed calls, none from numbers I recognized, and a text from Catherine Palmer. Seattle Business Journal already contacted me for comment. I declined. News travels fast. The next morning, I learned exactly how fast. Cole Foundation Gala interrupted by family bombshell. Arranged daughter reveals hidden fortune. Accuses parents of theft. The article ran in the Seattle Business Journal at 6 a.m. By noon, it had been picked up by 3 local news stations and a handful of national business blogs. The facts were all there: the $3.22 million loan, the Whitmore Trust, the confrontation at the gala, a few quotes from unnamed guests who'd witnessed everything, a tour no comment from Cole Properties' PR department. I read the article 3 times, waiting to feel satisfaction. What I felt instead was exhaustion. I hadn't wanted to humiliate my family publicly. I'd wanted them to acknowledge the truth privately, like adults. They'd forced my hand by trying to humiliate me first. But there was no joy in their downfall, only relief that it was over. Or so I thought. The real fallout was just beginning. 2 days after the gala, I met with Catherine Palmer at her office in Pioneer Square. She had prepared a stack of documents nearly 3 in thick, all the legal options available to me as controller of the Whitmore Trust. You could pursue the 18.7 million, she said, sliding the first folder toward me. The loan agreement is ironclad. Your grandfather made sure of that. I meant what I said. That money goes to Seattle Children's Hospital. She nodded, unsurprised. Then we moved to option 2, full financial separation. This folder was thinner, but no less significant. The Whitmore Trust has several smaller outstanding loans to Cole-related entities, about $2.1 million total from various transactions over the years. We can call those in immediately. Do it. And this? She handed me a formal letter. Terminates all financial relationships between Whitmore Trust Holdings and any business connected to your parents. Going forward, they have no claim to any resources that originated with your grandfather. I signed every document she put in front of me. One more thing. Catherine pulled out a final folder. Articles of incorporation. The Legacy Tech Foundation capitalized with $50 million from the trust. Mission supporting disabled entrepreneurs in technology. I looked at the name. You remembered. Your grandfather suggested it actually years ago. She smiled. He said, if anyone could turn tragedy into purpose, it would be you. I signed the foundation into existence at 3:47 p.m. on October 2nd, 2024. The same day, Cole Properties' largest investor demanded a full financial audit. Richard called 1 week after the gala. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe accept. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the faint hope that one member of my family could surprise me. Whitney. His voice was hoarse, stripped of the arrogance I was used to. I need to talk to you. So talk. A long pause. I heard him take a breath. I didn't know about the loan, the $3.2 million. Dad never told me where the startup capital came from. And that makes it better. No, or it makes me an idiot who never asked questions. Another pause. I'm sorry for what I said at the gala. For calling you about the inheritance papers. For all of it, really. I waited. I spent my whole life trying to be what Dad wanted. I didn't think about what that cost anyone else. His voice cracked slightly, including you. Richard, I appreciate the apology, but saying sorry to me isn't enough. What do you mean? You also need to apologize to yourself for 38 years of never questioning whether the people you trusted deserved that trust. He was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. I don't know how to do that, he finally said. Figure it out. And when you do, if you want to talk again, you know where to find me. I ended the call. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was a start. My parents notably remained silent. The dominoes began falling 6 weeks after the gala. I learned about most of it through Catherine Palmer, who maintained contacts throughout Seattle's business community. Some of it I read in the press, but none of it surprised me. On October 15th, Wellington Capital Partners withdrew their $4.88 million investment from Cole Properties. Their stated reason: concerns about corporate governance and financial transparency. On October 23rd, Pacific Northwest Bank requested a comprehensive audit of all Cole Properties accounts, a process that would tie up my father's operations for months. On November 1st, the Seattle Business Alliance announced that Edward Cole had voluntarily stepped back from his position on their board of directors. The press release thanked him for his years of service. It didn't mention why he was really leaving. The numbers kept accumulating. 3 major investors withdrew a combined $12 million. 2 commercial development deals in negotiation were canceled. Cole Properties' estimated portfolio value dropped 23% by the end of Q4. And then there was my mother. The Bellevue Women's Foundation asked Margaret to resign from their board on October 28th. The East Side Arts Council followed suit on November 3rd. By Thanksgiving, she had lost every charitable position she'd spent decades cultivating. The cruelest blow, though I took no pleasure in it, was the Seattle Social Club's decision to rescind her 2019 Woman of the Year award, after reviewing what they called new information about the circumstances of her family's success. I heard about that one from a former colleague who thought I'd want to celebrate. I didn't. "Aren't you satisfied?" Tiffany asked me that night after everything they did. No. I watched the rain streak down her apartment window. I didn't want this. I wanted them to tell the truth and treat me like family. Instead, they forced a public reckoning that hurt everyone, including people who had nothing to do with our dysfunction. That's not your fault. Maybe not, but it doesn't feel like victory either. Some justice tastes like dust and grief. The Legacy Tech Foundation officially launched on January 15th, 2025. I had spent 3 months building it from scratch, hiring staff, designing programs, establishing partnerships with disability advocacy organizations across the Pacific Northwest. Every decision carried the weight of what I wanted the foundation to mean. This wasn't charity, it was opportunity. Our flagship program, the Tech Access Initiative, offered $50,000 scholarships to disabled entrepreneurs pursuing technology ventures. No strings attached except a commitment to pay it forward, mentoring the next generation when they could. The first cohort included 20 recipients. A software developer with cerebral palsy building accessibility tools. A deaf UX designer creating better interfaces for the hearing impaired. A veteran with PTSD developing mental health apps for fellow soldiers. I hired 12 full-time staff members, 5 of whom had disabilities themselves. Our offices in South Lake Union were designed from the ground up to be fully accessible, not as an afterthought, but as a founding principle. GeekWire ran a feature story in February, From Wheelchair to Boardroom, How Tragedy Became Whitney Forer's Greatest Teacher. I didn't choose this path, I told the reporter, but I can choose what I do with it. My grandfather believed that real wealth isn't about what you have, it's about what you give. I'm trying to live up to that. The article mentioned my family situation in passing, unavoidable given the public nature of the gala incident, but I asked them to focus on the foundation's mission rather than the drama. Tiffany became the foundation's director of health and wellness, overseeing programs to ensure our entrepreneurs had access to medical support and mental health resources. She left Seattle General to join full-time. "You're sure about this?" I'd asked when she accepted the position. Whitney. She'd look at me with Daniel's eyes. This is what he would have wanted me to do. Help you help others. By March 2025, the foundation had supported 47 disabled entrepreneurs. 3 startups from our first cohort had already secured venture capital funding. My grandfather would have been proud. On December 14th, 2024, Exactly 9 months after the accident, I completed my final session of intensive physical therapy. Dr. Chen had me walk the length of his rehabilitation gym without crutches, 50 feet. The longest distance I'd managed unassisted since March. My legs trembled, my back ached. I had to stop twice to catch my breath, but I made it. 65% functional recovery, he said, reviewing my charts afterward. When you first came to me, the prognosis was 15%. You've exceeded every expectation. I had good motivation. You had stubbornness, he smiled. Which is the same thing sometimes. I still use crutches most days, especially during long events or stressful situations. I kept a wheelchair in my apartment for the days when my body simply couldn't cooperate. I'd accepted that full recovery might never happen, but I could walk. The day I managed 10 consecutive steps without any support, Tiffany recorded it on her phone. I watched myself later, unsteady, slow, but upright, and cried for 20 minutes. Daniel would have cheered. Lily would have clapped her little hands and demanded I do it again. They weren't there to see it, but I was doing it for them anyway. Every step was a step away from the woman who'd begged her parents for shelter. A step away from the daughter who'd spent decades seeking approval from people who'd never give it. A step toward whoever I was becoming. You know what the hardest part is? I told Tiffany that night. What? Realizing I was always strong enough to walk away from them. I just didn't believe it until I literally couldn't walk at all. She hugged me without saying anything. Some lessons have to break you before they can heal you. My mother reached out in February 2025. Not directly. She had her lawyer contact Catherine Palmer to request a private meeting. Neutral location, no Edward, no Richard. I almost declined. Then I thought about what my grandfather would have wanted. We met at a coffee shop in Kirkland on a gray Tuesday afternoon. Margaret arrived in a designer coat that probably cost more than my first car, but her face showed something I had never seen before. Uncertainty. We sat across from each other for a full minute before she spoke. I don't know how to do this, she said finally. Do what? Apologize. I've never. She looked down at her hands. I've never admitted I was wrong about anything. Now would be a good time to start. She took a breath. The night you came to the house after the accident, I should have opened the door. I should have held you. I should have been your mother. I waited. I was so worried about what people would think. The wheelchair, the attention. I told myself we were protecting you by keeping distance. Her voice cracked. I was lying to myself. I was protecting us, our image, our perfect facade. Thank you for saying that. Can you forgive me? I considered the question carefully. I accept your apology, I said. But forgiveness is different. That takes time and it requires change, not just words. What do you want from me? Space, honesty. And if you want any relationship at all, go visit grandfather's grave. Tell him what you told me. She nodded slowly. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a door cracked open for the first time in 30 years. I drove to Portland in March 2025, 1 year after the accident that destroyed my old life. Grandfather Harold's grave was in a small cemetery on the outskirts of the city, shaded by oak trees he'd loved. The headstone was simple granite, exactly as he'd requested. Harold Whitmore, 1938-2016. A man of quiet strength and extraordinary kindness. I brought flowers, white roses, his favorite, and a letter I'd written the night before. Hi, Grandpa. I lowered myself onto the bench beside his grave, my crutches propped against my knee. I'm sorry I didn't visit more. I'm sorry I didn't understand what you were trying to tell me when you were alive. I wiped my eyes, but I think I understand now. I read the letter aloud. Everything I wished I'd said while he could still hear me. How much his belief in me had meant. How his gift had saved me when I had nothing left. How I was trying to live up to the name he'd trusted me with. I'm not perfect, I said at the end, but I'm trying to be kind. I'm trying to be honest. I'm trying to be the person you saw in me, even when I couldn't see her myself. A breeze moved through the oak trees. Somewhere nearby, a bird sang. I sat with him for an hour, watching the shadows shift across his grave. When I finally stood to leave, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. 1 year after the accident, I stood in the Legacy Tech Foundation's new headquarters and surveyed what we'd built. 47 entrepreneurs supported, 3 successful funding rounds, 12 staff members who believed in our mission, a waiting list of applicants stretching into next year. Tiffany found me by the window watching the Seattle skyline. You okay? Yeah, I smiled. Actually, yeah, I think I am. My relationship with my parents remained distant, but no longer hostile. My mother had visited grandfather's grave, according to Catherine Palmer. My father still hadn't reached out, and I'd accepted that he might never change. Richard called occasionally. Short conversations, awkward but genuine. He was seeing a therapist, he said, trying to figure out who he was outside our father's shadow. I didn't know if any of them would ever truly understand what they'd done, but I'd stopped waiting for that understanding. Danielle and Lily were gone. Nothing would change that. But every day, I tried to live in a way that would have made them proud. A year ago, I said to Tiffany, I didn't think I'd survive this. And now I know I can survive anything. I turned from the window because I finally stopped looking for permission to be myself. The next chapter was mine to write. That's my story. Whitney Forer's story. A year of loss, discovery, and ultimately rebuilding. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. Your worth isn't determined by the people who should have loved you. Sometimes the family that matters most is the one you choose and the one that chooses you back. I was abandoned by my parents in my darkest moment, and it turned out to be the beginning of finding myself. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe. Your support helps this channel keep sharing stories like mine. Stories of resilience, justice, and the power of boundaries. And if you want to hear more, check the description for similar stories. I promise you won't be disappointed. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here.